We have to remember that our defense is not just a commitment of money. It is a commitment of will. Because as the Polish experience reminds us, the defense of the West ultimately rests not only on means, but also on the will of its people to prevail and be successful and get what you have to have. The fundamental question of our time is whether the West has the will to survive. Do we have the confidence in our values to defend them at any cost? Do we have enough respect for our citizens to protect our borders? Do we have the desire and the courage to preserve our civilization in the face of those who would subvert and destroy it?
Joining us now is the author of the New York Times bestseller, Understanding Trump, former Speaker of the House, Fox News contributor, Newt Gingrich. Newt, I'm so glad you're here because when I first saw him speak today in Poland, the only thing in my mind that came close is Ronald Reagan. And I'm not saying that Donald Trump is Ronald Reagan. I'm not saying it's the same historical moment. I'm not saying any of that. But I thought the speech both captured an optimistic tone, it was a challenging tone, hopeful and faith-based as well, which we're going to get into in a moment. But did you get a little bit of Reagan in what he was saying there?
No, I thought it was very much like Reagan's 1982 speech at Westminster, which is one of his best speeches. Trump is describing in a way almost no American president has since Franklin Delano Roosevelt, that this is a war about civilization. That we are in a struggle, and I thought he was particularly courageous in pointing out that not only are we in a struggle with Islamic terrorists, we're also in a struggle with bureaucratic secularists, such as the British court that basically wants to kill Charlie Gard, the little baby that they do not want to allow to go and have any kind of help either at the Vatican or in the United States. So I thought the really remarkable speech covered an extraordinary amount of history. And I think that it's a landmark. I think people will be able to see philosophically a lot better who Donald Trump is from this speech. And I think from the standpoint of the Polish people, it was enormously heartening to have an American president so decisively with them and so openly tough about communism and about Russia.
And hearkening back to Reagan, the evil empire speech, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. We have an enemy and those that seek to vanquish freedom. There was this moment from President Trump and the shared interest we have in defeating the terrorists. Let's listen.
We must stand united against these shared enemies to strip them of their territory and their funding and their networks and any form of ideological support that they may have. While we will always welcome new citizens who share our values and love our people, our borders will always be closed to terrorism and extremism of any kind.
Newt, I was wishing that the audience was mic'd up better because the audience was going nuts. There were many parts where they were cheering for Donald Trump, but in that moment, they're feeling the criticism, the brunt of the criticism they're getting now from Merkel and other European elites for not taking in more of the refugees. And they're like, no, we're not doing this. We're not doing what you're doing. And Donald Trump clearly gave support for their vision of protecting their own sovereignty and their own borders, and also, of course, fighting the common interests, common enemies.
Well, you know, there's a huge gap between the values of the Central Europeans, which includes not just Poland, but Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, a number of countries, and the values of Germany and the Scandinavian countries and the Netherlands and France. And I think what Trump has done is come down decisively on the side of those who worry about national identity, worry about survival, have been very practical. And, of course, he set the stage for the meeting in Hamburg, and he indicated clearly to Merkel he ain't backing down. So it'll be very interesting to see how that works.
Angela Merkel, speaking of the German chancellor today, talked about how the strength of Europe, the strength and successes of Europe and the rest of the world depends on open societies. Clearly, that was a nudge at what the elites believe is a increasingly isolationist United States. But I didn't hear that, Newt, in the speech where he reaffirmed our commitment to Article 5, NATO, and reasserted our belief in the important alliances that we have with our European counterparts. But Merkel felt the need to push the open societies line today.
Well, you know, there was a real strain coming out of World War II, having faced the horrors of World War I, then the horrors of Nazism, then the horrors of World War II. There was a real strain that said the only way to avoid war is to submerge our national identities, to basically all become Europeans. Well, it's turned out not to be a very good deal, because the bureaucrats in Brussels represent a secular worldview, which is fundamentally at odds, for example, with the Catholicism of the Polish people. And so I think what you're seeing is a real struggle between local nations and this kind of globalism that Chancellor Merkel represents.
Yeah, the global secularists versus the traditionalists. And speaking of faith and what this meant to the Polish people today, we're going to talk about more of that with Newt Gingrich right after the break. And later